Was Scott?
We've got Scott Poole and Jordan Reynolds on.
Yeah, we have a quorum. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We do have a quorum with Chair Gibbs and myself present here, and Supervisors Poole and Reynolds on the phone, and I know Supervisor Lemmer is walking in the room, so. Public comment? Nobody has approached either of us. So we'll move on to the approval of the minutes from the September 18th and 30th meetings. What are your wishes?
Move to approve, Mr. Chairman.
It's been moved to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Supervisor Lemmer, third by Supervisor Poole. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
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 That motion carries. Claim disallowance. Amanda, are you?
Thank you. At this time, we would be recommending disallowance of the Caleb Ross claim. The notice was filed over 120 days after the claim. The claim failed to clearly state the cause of action, why he thinks Marathon County is liable, and what his actual allegations were. So with that, we'd recommend disallowance.
All right, claim was for $300,000 for something.
Something.
Are there any questions for Amanda? If not, what are your wishes? Moved by Chair Gibbs. Was that a raised hand?
I'm sorry.
Is there a second to deny?
Motion is to deny the claim.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Supervisor Poole. Any discussion on that motion? If not, all those in favor of denying the claim will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Next item is approval of the September claims and question costs. I think Sam emailed those to the committee last Sunday, was it? Last week.
Saturday or Sunday, I don't know, one of the two.
Are there any questions for the finance director? If not, what are your wishes relative to the September claims and question costs? What are your wishes?
I'll move to approve.
Moved by Supervisor Poole to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Chair Gibbs. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of approval of the claims and question costs will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. We'll move on to item 3, 5A3, year-to-date budget reports. And Sam has included those in the packet. Sam?
Yes, just a couple of departmental budgets to note. If you look at the county clerk, you'll notice that there is a significant increase in the general government. A lot of that's due to tax deed sales, so there was $697,333 there. Throughout all of the budgets, you'll see a transfer in from other funds. That's most likely carryover funds that have not been recorded in there yet. So you should see those by the next time these come through. District Attorney had Chapter 950, which is their victim witness program, which was historically in the grants fund. We moved it over into the general fund. It made a lot more sense because the reimbursements kind of are delayed by a few months, so it's difficult to make sure that we're recording it in the correct period. If you look in emergency government, if you ever had any questions about the other local government revenue, that was City of Wausau's. They do contract with us for some emergency management services. In the facilities, there is a miscellaneous revenue that was $23,691. North Central Healthcare gave us a signage reimbursement. In the health department, we had some unexpected donations come in for a nurse partnership and then also some mental health collaboration. In the employee resources, their revenues are down a little bit, but you will see that next month go up because we'll charge interdepartmentals for services throughout the year. Under the county treasurer, under sales tax, we do have 10,186,000. We still have to transfer money over to the debt service. There are still 4 months that we will be receiving money in there for. Just as a reminder, January and February do get moved back due to accounting practices. Another high note for them too is $446,200 more in interest and penalties than we originally budgeted. And then again, if you're looking at debt service, sales tax still needs to be transferred over there, and then North Central Healthcare still needs to be billed. So again, you'll see that increase in the next month. There is one more payment that's due in December. If you're looking at the capital improvements fund, there is a significant increase in the expenditures. That's because of carryover or multi-year projects, in addition to the ARPA projects that didn't have a budget in for the year, but that will change. Other than that, I think that hit most of the highlights except for, we did have a good investment year. So if you're looking at 835, that does get allocated out amongst the different funds. So that will be done here in the next month or two.
What do you mean by a good investment year? Higher returns?
Yes.
What are we currently?
The current year to date is $5,597,460 for total income, and that should have been through August statements.
So what sort of rate are
I
we
don't-
getting? Is that a blended, I know it's a blended rate.
It's a combination because we have money with LGIP, which is 4 point something, along with some of our long-term investments, short-term investments. Some of these investments are restricted funds. I don't have the return rate just right this moment, but I can bring that next meeting if you'd like.
This is a local government investment pool with the Board of Commissioners? Who's that?
Yeah. And just to put that into context a little bit, probably about 4 years ago, it was 0.095%. It was very, very low. So seeing a 4.6, 4.0% has been extremely beneficial.
Are there any questions for Vice Chair Marshall?
Thank you. Could you repeat the debt service? You said move back January, February. That went way over my head, so.
No, that's okay. Debt service with sales tax. So the way that sales tax runs is when we get paid, let's say at the end of October, it's actually for August's sales tax. So anything that was earned in August, they have to pay by the end of September, and then the counties get paid at the end of October. So because of accounting practices, recognizing that revenue where it is earned, we have to move it back. So typically when you see our sales tax, we're 2 months behind because of that.
Does that mean that at the end of the year, you accrue what you believe that you're going to be receiving from the state to make a full year?
Correct.
Okay. And then my other question is on the tax deed sales. So the interest and penalties then go in the treasurer's office, but if there's any residual, that's what goes, doesn't the residual then go back to the owner?
Owner. These were some of the older, it depended on when you took the property. These are some of the residual ones prior to Act 216.
So probably don't anticipate any further.
Correct. That would not be an anticipated source of revenue moving in the future.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, thank you for that update. Item 5A4, The update on parcels proceeding through the interim process and consideration of next steps for parcels, and I think I'll just handle.
Can I kick it off and then
Sure,
you?
and then I'll,
So Amanda's still in the back. We had our court hearing earlier this week, so just to ground everyone on kind of where we're at. We started with this in-rem batch of 97 parcels that we started with title research. We had a number pay before we issued a petition, but a petition was filed with 89 parcels several months ago. 34, as of, I believe, well, probably about noon, 34 had paid. We have 2 parcels that we have to pull out of that in-rem process because they have ongoing probate. They're involved in an ongoing probate matter. 3 parcels are involved in bankruptcy proceedings. Then we have the 3 parcels we're gonna talk about here today. So what that leaves is we have about, I believe, 47 parcels that have an adjourned hearing for November 18th, where we hope that all of them pay. But if they don't, that would be the time when we would take a judgment with respect to those parcels and have the court, we'd be taking ownership and then proceeding through the process that Vice Chair Marshall referenced, where we would then turn to sell them and take any proceeds would go back, proceeds above our costs would go back to the original landowner. But there are these 3 parcels that are laid out in item 5A4. These are parcels that I think, quite honestly, Chair Robinson probably knows more than staff with respect to kind of the potential concerns here. But they are parcels that have had previous DNR involvement relative to contamination, either actively being monitored or had closed sites. So we have that adjourned date for November 18th. This gives us time to talk about really what do we want to do with these parcels. And with that, I think we have the opportunity for some investigation. But with that, I'll turn it back over to Chair Robinson, and I'll be taking notes.
so it is a complicated case. So the Weisenberger Tie and Lumber Company operated a sawmill lumber treatment facility on this property, and they used both pentachlorophenol, which is, if you're familiar with the Waleco site on Thomas Street, a wood preservative that was very effective. They used a carrier with it to get it to soak in, and then they switched to a copper chromium arsenic process, both of which are residual on the soils at the property. And I know that the DNR was taking some action in the early 2000s through probably 2010, 12. In 2014, the county received assessment money, and they hired GEI, which conducted an updated assessment of the property for us and found a number of recognized environmental conditions, and nothing has happened since. The taxes were stopped being paid about the time that Rudy Weisenberger passed away in 2012. And so it's been tax delinquent. The county's been paying, picking up the taxes for the other underlying jurisdictions. And we looked at it. I know that there is somebody using the site because I went out there last night to grab some photos, and Redline Trucking is using a portion of the site. And I believe that Mishka Oil is using the property at 1500 Weisenberger Lane, which would pose some problems to us if we took it and they were there. The county enjoys liability protection if we acquire it through tax delinquency, but once it's put into use, some of those liabilities are impacted, and I think we would want to spend some time looking at what the consequences of that would be. In addition, I think we would want to find out what the arrangements are with some of the tenants or the users of the site. I reached out to the DNR project manager in the Eau Claire office, and he indicated that nothing has happened in the last few years, outside of the fact that the Village of Marathon City had approached the DNR, he thought in 2022, about trying to get some loans and grants to fund it. I then reached out to Tom Coogan, who works in the Brownfield section in the grants in Madison, and he indicated that there potentially could be money for the Wisconsin assessment monies to complete an investigation at the site, and then ultimately through the Ready for Reuse program that would help clean up the site, which would have a 22% local share. My suggestion is that we delay taking title, sit down with the DNR, and if the Village of Marathon City is interested, potentially involve them in the discussions, find out what sort of liability we might have relative to tenants at the site, and how that might impact our liability protections, and then figure out what our next steps are. But to basically put these 3 parcels for Weisenberger Tie on hold until we can get additional clarification. So that's why Administrator Leonard and I were contacted, and we decided we needed to, I think, be a little bit more thoughtful in our approach to this.
And if I could just add one piece of context. So if you're looking at, what does the settlement process look like, and every year, what is Connie, when she's settling with the municipalities, how much are we talking about in ongoing tax bills? It's about just north of $2,400, but across the 3 parcels. So it's not insignificant, but it's also not a great deal of revenue that we would otherwise be anticipating. Going through the process and starting the process, I still think is positive, because people are, to Chair Robinson's point, we understand it, they are making use of that parcel, and perhaps us initiating NREM will incentivize them to pay, but also perhaps not. I don't know. I know, Connie, you've talked about those parcels a number of times before. Is there anything else in terms of history? I know we talked about having an inspection warrant a number of years ago to have some evaluation of that property done, but I think, consistent with the characterization from Chair Robinson, really there hasn't been substantive progress on those parcels in a great number of years.
Right. In 2022, Andy Kurtz, when he was still the administrator of Village of Marathon, he came to me, and then we sat with the sheriff's office, and then they were patrolling the area at that time. But then they had several grants, and then they lapsed, and then we needed a warrant, and then we attempted a warrant, and it was incorrect. So each time we worked with the DNR, we needed a new warrant every time they were going to go there. And then just recently, I reached out to Steve Cherrick. Now he's a village administrator, and he said that he's still working with them. And then the DNR said that they were busy and couldn't get on the site. So we need specific dates in order to have that warrant given. So that's where we're standing with it. It's been an ongoing thing.
Yeah, so I think the suggestion of kind of hitting the pause button, and we can evaluate from a legal perspective whether that pause button means actually stop and dismiss the petition for those parcels. I'm kind of thinking that's probably what it would mean. But regardless of whether we're able to just delay or actually dismiss those 3 parcels from the petition, and then sit down with the village, figure out what their appetite is, does make logical sense to me. I know at a very high level, the county does enjoy, as Chair Robinson referenced, if we do move forward and take the parcels, we do have protections, generally speaking, with respect to the contamination on site, and there are funds available. But if I'm being very transparent, I don't know the full scope of those things, and I don't know what we would do with the parcels, even once we took them, other than hold them. So additional investigation and collaboration with the Village of Marathon City does make sense to me.
I'm not sure, and I'm just speaking off the cuff, that an inspection warrant is needed or enlightening at this point. We know that we have pentachlorophenol, wood preservative, lingers in it. There is documentation. There was action taken on the site. We know we have copper, chromium, and arsenic, which don't break down. They're inorganics, and they'll be present. So we know that there's the presence. The question is what's our next step? Usually the inspection warrants are to determine if there is the presence of a release, to enlighten you to go forward. It's not there necessarily to conduct a full-blown investigation. I think we need, if we're going to move ahead, need probably additional information relative to clarifying and quantifying the degree and extent of the contamination, how any of the contaminants have moved through the soil, if they have, and if they're in groundwater. And I don't know that you would get that through a single inspection warrant. So we'll give some thought to I think we should give some thought to what is necessary, but I wouldn't spend a lot of time on an inspection warrant, given the fact that they're open sites. We've got known contamination and documented, and our own report from 2015 kind of flags that. But it still may be worthwhile or enlightening if the DNR requires it for a grant. But Tom Coogan was going to get back to me. There is some concern about whether there are assessment dollars available now, and I think we would want to make sure that our acquisition coincides with that inspection or additional investigation.
One of the reasons that we did the inspection warrant is because the DNR wanted to get back on there because they let it lapse for 5 years and they were supposed to do soil testing for 5 consecutive years. So that's one of the reasons why we needed that inspection warrant. Every time they tried to go there, they were denied access. The gates were locked. They were denied access. So that's why. And then Andy Kurtz, he had several grants that he had, and I think it would be beneficial to touch base with Village and Marathon if they do have those existing grants, if they're still active. And there was also an interest of the outlying owners of the property that are on the outside of them were interested in those 3 parcels, but they would be more interested to purchase if it was cleaned up. That's another reason why we were trying to get the DNR in there, to at least test it. We've also had some notification of contamination by the neighbors saying that their water was contaminated, but I never saw anything that was sufficient enough to say that it actually is. So I never saw anything.
Thank you. Okay, what are your, Chair Gibbs?
Well, in light of all of that information, I think that we would need to pause the taking of those 3 parcels, the parcels with parcel numbers 151, 280, 501, 19968, and the same prefix 9969 and also 9994. So my motion would be to pause and remove those from the in-rem process at this point until we get some more investigation.
Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Lemmer. Is there any discussion on that motion? If not, all those in favor of that motion will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Can I ask a clarifying question? As I understand the motion, we can do that at the November 18th hearing. We'll see if they pay in the interim. But is that consistent?
Supervisor Marshall? Or-
Just one question. At our last meeting, we were told that court date was, we would know how many properties we were going to take as of October 9th?
7th,
Or is that?
yesterday.
Yeah.
So when we scheduled that court hearing, and credit to Amanda and Rhea from my office and others, as we learn more about the process, the court hearing date was set based on the last day of redemption. Correct me, keep me honest here, Amanda. Last day of redemption, that is the last day you have to pay, which was set based on yesterday. The statute allows for another 30 days under the legal in rem process for someone to file a legal answer to contest the taking. So that's the date for November 18th. So great catch, good memory. We'll have, again, hopefully when we go on November 18th, we have all parcels paid. But I would say a fair number have, which is great. And Connie's office has been busy taking those payments. But you are correct. I had indicated that we would know how many would take on October 7th, but actually that's how many have paid. They have 30 days to file a legal answer.
Any other comments? Okay, if not, we did vote. Right? Yeah. right, we'll move on to overview of the highlights of the annual budget with respect to the departments and organizations which are under the control or under which the committee has jurisdiction. So Administrator Leonard, and
I'm not going to give you guys any more of a presentation. Every other committee's got this overview. Well, you got the full overview of all the departments when Sam, Chris, and I made the presentation last week. So happy to answer any questions about anything that was said at the last meeting about any of the departments over which you have jurisdiction, but I'm not going to take more of your time than I already took last time.
I did have a brief discussion with Deputy Administrator Holman, and I have a few concerns relative to the KIP funding level and what projects we're kicking down the road, and just a little bit more, looking for a little bit more enlightenment. If hypothetically, if we had $500,000 of additional funds, which projects would you move in from a priority perspective into the KIP?
For $500,000, I would submit the JLH Air Handler Unit 12 and Chiller project. That one was designed this year, and it has operational implications. If it were to fail, then you may have to move people around. There's no sign of imminent failure, but there's a reason we're replacing it. So that one's the highest priority of everything on the list. If there were more funds, I created a sort of similar form with some alternate projects listed. There's some deferred projects, the juvenile buildings exterior envelope, that's been deferred for 3 years. So that's one that continues to go up in costs, and essentially everything that goes wrong on the outside just continues to get worse. And so as that deteriorates further, then the scope of work increases. There's a potential project from CCITC with data tagging. I know that Jerry has spoken with Administrator Leonard about that one. It was something that wasn't initially funded by the city, but I think they're having conversations about whether or not to move forward with that one. So we would have a share of that overall project at the county. That one is much smaller in scale. If there were smaller amounts of funds remaining and you led with, say, the jail air handler unit, then you could target projects like the heat wheel replacement at the juvenile facility as well, because that saves energy and has a pretty quick ROI on it. So if there's larger chunks of funds, then I think there's some clear 1 to 3 projects there that you would put in. And then using the balance to maybe cover some of the smaller ones, or depending on availability of funds, sort of balance the approach.
So the jail project is $525,580. So that would be your top priority?
Yes, sir.
And the only reason I raise that is that I have a concern about kicking projects down the road, and I'd like to explore just the opportunity to address some of those projects and move them forward. And my thought was, and I'm open for funding sources, but to look at the sales tax projections, because we're projecting 6.3, and we've received more than that over the last couple of years, understanding that in essence, if we have excess sales tax collections, it kicks into the future KIPs, but it's a 2-year delay because it goes into the audit. But it would just let us look at moving up some of those projects that might have more of a need now and look at it in the future. I get concerned because we sort of adopted a capital improvement project we moved away from that old ranking system where we never paid any attention to the ranking into one where we now try to, and I don't want to have any more jail floors or library roof situations facing the county, which were emergency actions and very costly actions in the past. So Supervisor Lemmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I share your concern, but I also wonder if we take sales tax now, how does that impact the future KIP? Because I thought that's kind of how we're in a little bit of a, we're in a little bit of a pickle now because we robbed the CIP, and those are my words, not the board's words. But what are the ramifications, I guess, of doing that?
Well, your funding strategy, kind of as both Chair Robinson and Supervisor Limmer, as you alluded to, any revenue above expense that is recorded in the year following the audit does roll into be available for CIP. So we built the budget, the 2026 proposed budget, which the committee accepted, using the budget assumption that the board adopted of a $16.3 million sales tax projection. But as Chair Robinson referenced, and as I put in a number of places, actually, that we put in a number of places in the budget, those are conservative numbers. Forward Analytics is projecting substantially more than that. So to your direct question of what would be the implication, if you are more aggressive with your budget with regard to sales tax receipts this year, or I should say in 26, and you use it for capital improvements, you just would have less available in the rollover in the formation of the 28 budget, But you do, I think, as to the underlying point Chair Robinson is making, you address the capital projects earlier. It's really a question of how risk averse do you want to be? Do you want to know exactly how much money you have you're going to have in your capital improvement program budget to fund the projects and then have a bit of a lag? Or do you be more aggressive in your projections and fund the projects earlier? Either one strategy will work, but you can't, it's much more difficult to mix and match, right? You got to find the level of risk aversion you want to stick with and then stick with it. The danger of saying, all right, Forward Analytics is projecting $18.3 million. You budget $18.3 million and you propose to spend it all through your budget. We do capital improvements early in the year in terms of letting out a lot of RFPs, then we sign contracts, so then you're locked in. The costs, when you pay the bills, come later, as Sam alluded to earlier, but you know the costs are coming because you sign the contract. If sales tax projections, the economy, there's a downturn, and your revenues start to come in under projections, then you have a challenge because you've already signed contracts, you don't have necessarily the ability to get out of those without penalty, and you need to make budget cuts. So Marathon County's approach, long before I started working here, was kind of the former approach, which is the conservative estimates, delay the projects until the year following the audit and fund them that way. So that was a longer answer than you probably needed, but I hope that answers the question.
Chair Gibbs.
I think that the reality, if you were to increase the projection of sales tax closer to what Forward Analytics is suggesting, the risk is if you don't collect the revenue. But as long as you're using that revenue to pay capital, you're not hurting the capital funding. You're pulling the money in today versus waiting 2 years from now, as long as you collect the actual sales tax in 2026.
Vice Chair Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I was, I know that we've talked about this before. In the 2023 budget, we weren't sure if we were going to get the $2 million federal grant for the Forensic Science Center. So we encumbered out of reserve for that. However, later we did get that grant. Is that correct? So we could unencumber $2 million from a reserve and potentially use that to fund this?
We did a little of, you're correct, the board, and I'm going to be close on numbers, it was about a little over $4 million of social improvement that was discussed as part of the development of the, was it 2024 budget or 25?
Four.
So that is still within the project fund as of now, but as part of building the 26 budget, we did exactly what you alluded to, and I think, is it 1.1 million?
$1,107,723.
Yeah, so that was pulled back to fund capital, that 1.1-ish million dollars. We still have to wait on the federal grant. We are going back and trying to maximize as much as we can with what, of the $2 million we were awarded to up to 2 million, there's pretty, Chris, keep me honest and correct me, there are pretty strict limitations on what that can be used for. So we're trying to go back and make sure we can maximize that and look to use it going forward. Similarly, we were fortunate in that we got a number of grants from local community organizations. So that allowed us to free up the 1.1 million. As we truly close out the project and try to maximize that grant, my expectation is more will come back. But we did exactly what you alluded to try to free up some money for capital this year.
So the question is, have we already used what we're anticipating freeing up, or do we need to unencumber those funds as this committee and then allow you to use that for potentially this project?
I don't believe we've paid bills with the $4 million that have been allocated, or have we, Chris?
Some of it has been.
Well, for cash flow, we did use some of those funds because it's a combination of revenue sources. For this year, the $2 million grant from the federal government was not included because of where it's at in the process. And so that was not drawn upon. So any funds moving forward, once it goes through their review process, then those would
Come back.
follow the traditional process, for a future year.
So I
So
think
we
that,
have, we have the ability to do this again, basically, reallocate those funds.
and if I may, I think that allows you to be, and maybe this is your underlying point, Mr. Chair and Vice Chair Marcel, allows you to perhaps feel more comfortable pulling sales tax, increasing that. We'll know with greater clarity over the next 8 to 9 months. Because how long does that grant go, Chris? How long can we pull from that federal grant?
The grant window's through fiscal year '27, so
We're going to try to maximize it longstanding. So you could be bit more aggressive on sales tax. Again, we built the budget based on what you told us to, which was 16.3. So you can probably up that. I'd feel very confident with, or I shouldn't say that. I feel comfortable with certainly the $525,000 project, particularly in light of what you brought up with social improvement.
Supervisor Marshall.
One other question. What are the assumptions for the tax deeded properties as far as penalties and interest? I know the original document that showed the 89 properties in total had about $2 million of interest and penalties. So I guess my question is, how much of that have we realized already in the 34 that paid? And are we anticipating the other 47?
For this year, for calendar 25?
Well, if we wait until November 18th to take it, we have a 90-day window to sell it. So I'm certain that those 47 would be next year's interest and penalties, right?
I don't know how that would go. I will tell you, my inclination right now is because we're dealing with aged properties, there's not
It
a
would
lot
be a
of,
certain percentage of that 2 million. I
Yeah.
get that.
the budget assumption for 26 that I have up, that we built in the budget. You have that available, Sam? I think we did project less than going down because we should be getting, we're going to hopefully clean up a lot of that list.
So if we look at all of the interest on taxes and penalty on taxes, now that's current taxes that acquired penalty and interest, that's tax delinquents that have, it's in two places in the budget. It's in the non-departmental budget as well as the CIP funding. So there was $311,922 in there for that. Let me just pull the year-to-date budget for the Treasurer's Department in 2025.
So we switched where it's being recorded for next year?
Correct. Part of that is because CIP is funding, or part of CIP funding is from that. And then the other part is we have a non-departmental when it's not necessarily department specific, or in this case where it offsets tax levy that then gets dispersed out, so that we truly have more of an operating budget when we're looking at things. Just a little easier to read sometimes, rather than having the big negative numbers in there. Let me just pull treasurer here. I think we did increase the budget a little bit because of realized actuals. So in the 2025 budget, we budgeted $488,500 for interest and penalties combined. To date, we have gotten $934,700. So the difference between that and what we budgeted in 2026's budget is about $117,000.
So the 2026 budget is how much?
$817,422
Okay,
between both of those departments.
thank you.
Any follow-up questions on that before we move on? Chair Gibbs, did you have your?
No,
okay.
I'm fine.
All right, any other, well, do we want to, let's focus in on the KIP right now. So if we, in light of the discussion, you know, you've got some pretty hefty cans we're kicking down the road. Chair Gibbs.
So I guess my question is to Deputy Administrator Holden. So the one project you're talking about as far as the jail, that's 580,000?
525, 580.
525.
If you're looking,
And
it's on page 170 in the budget, under facilities and capital management, list is number 1.
That's a HVAC update project?
Yes, sir.
Moving the mechanicals to the new Freon? Okay. And that item is end of life currently, and also cannot be basically repaired under the current environmental restrictions for that kind of system. Is that correct?
Correct. For newer equipment, you can replace parts for some time because EPA didn't want to burden people with things that could be replaced, but they have specific call-outs in terms of a percentage of these parts or a percentage of that part. And once you hit that, any one of those thresholds, it triggers a whole system replacement. So but this system is itself at the end of its life. So it's one that, you know, as far as speaking with staff, that they're like, this is the main risk and worry from their point of view in terms of putting it off. Now, I mean, we can likely limp it along. Like I said, there's no signs of it like failing imminently, but it's in the area of end of life. And so that's why it poses the highest risk and is the highest priority.
Well, and it clearly becomes an operational issue if it does go down, because it's clearly, housing for our inmates, so.
Yep.
In light of all of that discussion, I would make a motion that we increase sales tax revenue by the $525,000, but then increase the CIP expenditure by that project.
Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Lemmer. Any discussion on that? Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Are there, Vice Chair Marshall?
On that same line, what is the assumption for the sale or RFP regarding River Drive and Thomas Street in the 2026 budget?
We didn't have any revenue from the sale of those properties in the budget.
Okay,
And I would hazard to guess what we'll get, but we didn't put a revenue line in.
but we anticipate getting something, right?
I think that's a safe assumption. I mean, you'll get something. The question is, what? We will have those RFPs ready for you by the end of the year. Chris and I just talked, and we're hoping to have it also ready for some discussion about the UW. And I actually just got an email from our last remaining tenant at Thomas Street that I need to follow up with her yet today.
Are we getting, I know at one time we did have an appraisal on the social services building.
Correct.
Are we getting an appraisal on River Drive as well?
Yeah, I think that's an appropriate next step. It's always helpful. It probably would be a good idea also for us to freshen up the one from Thomas Street that was done quite a number of years ago during the course of the pandemic. And I think my sense is the commercial real estate market is different. So I think
Yeah.
all good points, and quite honestly, would do the same thing as we move through with the UW.
So the county board at the time of the sale could direct where those proceeds would go, whether it be the capital improvement, debt reduction, or whatever
Just-
purpose that we would.
It's important to point out it's an opportunity
Right.
to fund further capital.
And as we know, government doesn't always work it's not a 100-yard dash.
No, but it's been empty for some time.
We're working on that. We'd like to get it down to a 400. Any other items? Supervisor Lemmer?
Not keep related, is that okay? So in the budget, we have, from the Health and Human Services Committee, pledged to put in about $175,000 into the response, the emergency response to homelessness. And I guess I just want to have a conversation because I feel we aren't going to solve homelessness if we just manage the crisis night by night. I feel we need to pay attention to the gaps from the opioid settlement or the opioid settlement gap analysis, and it did point out that there were gaps. Yesterday, I was at a meeting at the United Way where we're strategically planning the next few years of our work, and top on the list is increased case management. The second on the list is creating pathways for people to return to their communities. I think my biggest concern is Wausau residents are being double taxed with the city putting their funding into the emergency shelter. Now the county is pledging to put some in, and I agree we need to have that space. But I think in treating people with who are struggling with housing security, one of the things in the RFP I thought the county wanted was a pathway to stability. And that is done not through emergency management, but through building up our case management and building up the coordination between the county and the city. So we've agreed to hire a person to coordinate it through the health department. I would like to take either all or some of that funding, the $175,000, and dedicate some of that to that health department position so that once the analysis, the pathways, the gaps are really formed, if there is a recommendation, we can snap and get that funded quicker so that we can make a difference quicker. You know, right now we've got people coming from all over, so I think we recognize that this is a county issue, but no other municipality in the county is paying twice. And I think that's the biggest thing that that I want to discuss, and then really point out that we need to give our people struggling with unhoused or housing security pathways to stability, not just a night-by-night management. I'm not 100% sure how to do that, other than making sure some of that money can be used by the person who is hired, assuming we find somebody, to be that project manager, so that when a recommendation is made, it's more likely that it can be funded right away without having to come back to us to get that permission.
So is that, you're throwing it out for discussion
Yeah, I guess. I mean,
or for
I would love feedback and thoughts.
Chair Gibbs?
I think that the challenge that, I don't disagree with the premise of the challenge, but I think that taking the 175 out of the emergency shelter, the CJCC, the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, had a great discussion about the progress and the challenges with the homelessness shelter and the homelessness problem by the chief of police. And the problem is increasing and it's not decreasing. So removing the 175 there and allocating it to something else is only going to create a bigger hole when the problem is continually increasing. So I as much as I understand we need to have a definitive process to provide services to individuals to move them into stable housing, I don't know that I would be in favor of taking that 175, because then you have created a bigger hole that the city of Wausau, and in this case now, the whole county is contributing to. So it's not just the city of Wausau that's contributing, because if we take that 175 out of there, then the city of Wausau is going to either have to, and the board is committed to addressing the issue. So the 175 would really be challenging and would just create a huge problem, because now we don't have enough sufficient funding for the existing issues and the existing people that are being served now.
Well, and I appreciate that. And I see this as a double project to manage. We have to get people safe night by night. And right now, the city of Wausau has committed to take care of that, I'm sure. It is not something Chief Barnes wants to do, but they've done it for the last at least 3 years, maybe 5. And it's finally now where the county is acknowledging that this isn't just a Wausau problem. So I'm happy about that we're recognizing that we've got law enforcement people bringing treating people, these are the words Chief Barnes has used in previous meetings, like hot potatoes, taking them from their communities to Wausau because we have this facility. It's, I think, morally repugnant to do that. I really wish the city would have an MOU that had decorum with, we want warm handoffs. We aren't dropping people off in the middle of the night at Quick Trip, so that Quick Trip employees can call our police department and solve that. But we also need to look at the second piece of that project, and that's once we get them in a safe night place, get their basic needs of shelter and food, someplace warm, we can funnel them into a program that has capacity. And again, we've got lots of services in Marathon County. They're not maybe perfectly coordinated, so we're hoping that the person that's hired at the health department can dial that in and make that more efficient. But we have a caseload management problem. We've got waiting lists, we've got capacity that needs to be addressed as well. And so if that means expanding case management teams, or if that means, I mean, we've got people coming from the hospital with oxygen tanks going to emergency shelter. What if the recommendation is we need a better place for them? Without any funding, that's not going to happen anyway. So this assures that there's funding available so that if there's a recommendation, we're able to jump on that now and get that dealt with quicker and not double tax Wausau taxpayers because other municipalities don't want to pay two. This is two projects.
I'd like to just ask the administrator to walk us back in history, and I think for the sake of this committee and for those that are listening. So we took the action earlier this year relative to the earmarking of funds. Can you just revisit that and where those dollars are going? What money we're looking at for the 2026 budget that has been either not spent to date and where you're anticipating additional demands on the county's budget to deal with the issue of homelessness.
Okay. All right. Happy to do that. Let me just write down notes, make sure I have everything. So I'll do my best to recount history, but earlier in '25, the board approved by resolution amending the 2025 budget to allocate $200,000 from its contingency fund for the purpose of funding emergency shelter services in conjunction with the city of Wausau, so at a 50% split. So initially, at that time, my recollection is that there was a belief that some third party would be operating that shelter and that both the city and county would contribute toward the costs of that. Ultimately, the operation of that shelter is currently, as Supervisor Lemmer referenced, being done by the city of Wausau. So on a monthly basis, they submit invoices to the county for that respective 50% share. I don't have the exact amount to date that you've expended, but to your ultimate question about funding in the 2026 budget, as Supervisor Lemmer referenced, there was a action taken by the Health and Human Services Committee to continue that funding approach. And that was, I think, this is my characterization, consistent with the original request that came from the city. My recollection was that it was for 2 years of funding. Of course, the county budget's on an annual basis, and ultimately the resolution in '25 was to authorize $200,000, up to $200,000 for that purpose. But again, there is a balance remaining, and we project a balance remaining. that is one of the three sources essentially of the funding that I proposed in the budget document that you all accepted for continued discussion and modification. So 75,000 is my recollection, Sam, is that right? That we are anticipating as a rollover to still be available from the 2025 allocation?
Correct.
So that is a carry forward in the budget to essentially say, hey, you've already allocated those funds. Here's that funding from the 2025 budget to be used in 26 for the same purpose. The remaining 100,000 is essentially split. If you read the contingency section, the contingent fund section of your budget, it's referenced that essentially it's sitting, $50,000 is sitting in that area. And the reason, my rationale for that was you're pledging up to $175,000 for those services by virtue of the Health and Human Services action, because the total projected amount that the city signed their contract for with a third party was in calendar year one was going to be 350,000. So 350,000 divided by 2, county share 175. So it is contingent in the sense that maybe you're not all that is needed, and we can monitor that through the year, but it's vested, it's sitting there. The remaining 50,000 is funded, it lives within my special projects budget. So county administration has for long before I've been here had a special projects fund that we essentially, when things come up, kind of like what Supervisor Limmer referenced with within a department, hey, we need to do a thing. Or a good example, Chris's project earlier this year with the jail controls project where we had funding in the capital improvement program, thinking the scope of putting together an RFP was going to be X, and it turned out to be X plus Y plus Z. I was able to use that funding to kind of start that project to refine the number for future years. So that funding exists. The last leg of that stool, the remaining 50,000, I just know I need to fund that out of my special projects budget. Again, if the costs to deliver that shelter services don't rise to that level, you don't utilize contingency and you don't utilize the special project funding, the funds wouldn't be expended. So I think that answers your first question about history. If a funding request, if a need was identified during the year, where would we turn to for funding? I'm going to give you the lawyer answer, it depends. If it's a position that is ultimately determined, hey, we need to fund a position, you have a very clear process laid out in your rules, particularly ordinance section 4.20 that talks through what I need to do and what our team needs to do to bring those forward. With any request for funding, my first step is as consistent with kind of the budget presentation that I gave last week. We always try, and my first question to department heads is, well, what funding is available? One, that means within your budget, but also what funding is available from external sources? Because the answer is it depends. Sometimes some of our funding can come from other revenue sources, either at the state or federal level, grants. So if a request, I think to get to the heart of your question, if a request were to come, where would I look to for funding? It depends on what it is, but my first answer is going to be, help me understand why we have this need. Is it a system need? Who's best to deliver it? And I think that's going to be I envision that to be a fair amount of work for whoever is ultimately hired in that public health coordinator role, if that does make its way into the 2026 adopted budget. What are our needs? Clarify what the county role is, get the system working well, and then assess where the gaps are. I frequently get requests for, hey, we need more staff for a thing. And my push is always, back saying, well, let's talk about, are there some system changes? Are there ways we can do it differently before simply saying, hey, let's allocate funding to a thing? So I think my approach would be the same if a request came forward for funding. And that first part is going to be, is it truly the county's role to deliver this service or create this position? Or is that something outside of that core county function and some other entity would have to do that?
So as you understand the contract that the city is advancing, is that for $350,000?
I don't have it in front of me, but my understanding was the contract for 26 was to deliver that service was not to exceed $350,000. I do know I have it somewhere and I can pull it up.
So if the county were to not fund that, would then it be the city's responsibility to fund that contract entirely?
I don't know. I would hazard a guess on what the city's approach would be if that funding were not available. That's really a question for someone from the city.
Vice Chair Dickinson.
Thank you, Chair Robinson. So a couple questions and just clarifications. The 200,000 was for shelter access. Resolution 1225 has nothing else in there in the fiscal note. If you want to look that up, it doesn't talk about anything other than shelter access. So there wouldn't be any services or anything like that. Is that correct? Because that was the resolution we passed.
Yeah, so emergency shelter services.
It says shelter access in the fiscal note of Resolution 12-25 that we passed. So I would need the clarification because there was a lot of discussion about what we were doing, and I thought it was directed towards shelter access. That's what it says in the fiscal note. Number two, that's only for 2025, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So if we don't go up to that number, we're not allocating anything in 2026 to anything related to the homelessness task force and what was passed unless we put it into this budget. Is that correct?
It was built into the budget based on the direction from Health and Human Services to continue that access, to ensure access to emergency shelter services. So it is in the budget for 2026.
To be voted on in November?
Correct.
Okay. The third thing has to do with what is the city's request? Are they so they're asking for they're asking for a match up to like $175,000 for 26? Is that what you were referencing?
I believe that's consistent with the request they made of Health and Human Services and the task force.
And so that goes beyond shelter access, but goes to shelter services, or just shelter access? Is it just getting into the shelter?
I don't know if I'm going to be speaking semantically. It's for operation. It's to have access to emergency shelter services. So the contract that I believe the city entered into, consistent with the RFP, the request for proposals that was put out, was for some third party to offer emergency shelter services for the unhoused population in the metro area of Wausau. And the single proposal that came in that met the requirements will do that. And my recollection of the cost was $350,000.
So my last comment is, I think it has to be pretty clearly delineated as we come up into the budget as to what the money is being used for, because I think I'm asking these questions because I don't want there to be, and just apologize for the negative term, a bait and switch, so to speak, that people were thinking we're going to put this into a facility and now it might be directed into some other service for homelessness, to address homelessness. And that can potentially be a problem for, any supervisor, in any district. So thanks for answering my questions.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Supervisor Lemmer, you look like.
I wasn't sure if somebody online was trying to chime in, but
I want to be clear that I see homelessness as a crisis situation here. I'm not debating whether or not we need more or the emergency services. And I'm also not saying that this money could be used to hire staff. I mean, right now, our social services department contracts with North Central CAP to manage some of the housing needs that they're working with, maybe through, I don't know if it's Family Keys or whatever, but without having money available to maybe increase that contract to North Central CAP to get people into a stable place, or to offer maybe training for peer support staff. You know, I don't know what it would be, but my concern is again, I see this as two separate projects. And if the Wausau municipality wants to fund the emergency, I would welcome all of the other municipalities continuing that access and that funding, and let the county do what the county does best and fund the wraparound services that are needed to keep people housed.
Chair Gibbs, and then
I think the vice chair said it, you know, at this point, we haven't identified what those other services are. I think what, in my take on what the board's actions were, one, we provided emergency shelter for 2025 with a funding up to $200,000. And we budgeted to provide emergency shelter up to 175, which is half of the contract for emergency shelter for 2026. We also have built into the budget a position at the health department to look at what was similar to the La Crosse model, but that is consistent with what the La Crosse model does, is identify where the additional services are needed. So I don't know that in building a budget without identifying what those services that are going to be contracted for or potentially contracted for, I could build into the budget today. Because I think that's what the individual will be able to determine what the need is, and then from the health department, they will determine what the needs are, and then come back potentially and figure out whether that's a county role. Is that a is that a role for the faith-based community? Is that a role for the philanthropy entities? But what is that need, or who is going to, and who's that responsibility? But at this point, I can't put something onto and take something out of what the board is given direction for, and that was providing emergency shelter today for the 2026 year, and not know what that need is, or what that could be needed. But that, I think, is what the individual at the health department is going to be able to identify. Then we can have a discussion as to whether or not that's the county's role, whether or not that's the faith-based community's role, whether or not that's a role of some other entity outside of the county.
so I have a question. I know that we had the homeless task force, and the number one priority was to deal with the emergency shelter activities, but I'm trying to recall where we left the other services, the gaps going forward, and I think there's a need for the board through its members in the committees to try to make sure we don't lose sight of that going forward, but I think it's got to be a deliberative process. I share Supervisor Lemmer's concerns, but one of the concerns that I have is that if we delete our funding, instead of the county tax or the city taxpayers paying twice, once through the county levy and the city levy, either they could end up paying once through the city levy for the entire amount. And I would be concerned about what the ramifications of that would be going forward. I think we need, my understanding is we were looking at a 1 to 2 year period of time where we were going to try to stabilize the emergency shelter services. And then the county's role would be, we would be out of that business, and we would then be looking at what the other gaps are. And maybe I'm wrong in that recollection, but I remember some, public and, I thought public, but certainly private discussions relative to that goal. And I think there is a need to make sure that we continue to look for the pathway out of homelessness and how do we support that in a effective manner. Go ahead.
I did find the resolution. Thank you, Vice Chair Dickinson, for the number, and thanks you for Sam for actually finding it. So that resolution does reference funding in 2025, committing up to $200,000 to contribute towards funding a proposal for 365-day shelter services that meet specific programmatic requirements and benchmarks. Those are set forth later in the resolution. I'm not going to read it. It's a page and a half, but it does provide that now, therefore, be it resolved, the $200,000 for 2025, and then be it further resolved that the Board of Supervisors directs the administrator to work with the City of Wausau to identify ways to achieve 365-day shelter access and to build into the 2026 budget a proposal to address these ongoing issues without committing Marathon County to long-term funding of shelter services. So that is what drove, and then all the requirements throughout the rest of the resolution drove the RFP process that the city ultimately released their RFP, which was answered earlier this year. But I think to Vice Chair Dickinson's point, the budget doesn't commit broad funding to address homelessness. There's not a segmented portion of the budget that would be available without coming back to the board to have the conversation that Chair Gibbs referenced about, is this a county role, and have supervisors ask questions and the like.
Anything else on this or any motions relative to this item? And again, between now and our meeting on Monday, we will be authorizing the budget for publication. There is the ability to amend all the way through November 11th, so that we are at one step of many steps in the process to give people an opportunity to look at clarifying where they would want clarification and offering alternatives in delivery. Supervisor Lemmer?
Yeah, I am not ready to make a motion, but I will definitely be continuing to consider this and just encourage anybody who's listening to reach out to me if they've got thoughts. So.
All right, anything else relative to the budget and the departments and those items under our purview? If not, again, we have asked all committee members and members of the county board to provide to us by Friday any additional changes prior that they would like to see us to consider prior to publication. I'm assuming you will amend the resolution or the publication notice in light of the action that we took today. But then we will then deal with that issue on Monday morning at 8:30. At this time, I'm not anticipating a significant number of amendments, so it may be a quick meeting, but we have to do it on Monday in order for Sam to work with the Daily Herald to get it into the paper for publication, which will freeze it until after the public hearing. But then the amendment process goes on until November 11th. Anything else at this time? And again, Supervisor Marshall.
If you could just refresh my memory on, if we took the net new construction for last year and this year, what would our allowable, because I believe last year we used sales tax to pay for our debt service, and this year we're using debt service, so
You used a portion of sales tax last year, absolutely correct. The total amount last year was the percent was 1.78 for net new construction. This year is 1.61, so 3.39, is that right?
okay.
I'll double check my math because that was in my head.
Because we really have increased the levy even more than the net new construction. I believe our increase is 5.9% proposed this year.
Correct. The net new construction last year was 1.78, this year 1.61. The total increase over the 2 years on net new construction was 3.39. The total increase over the 2-year period, because last year there was no increase in
Right.
in rate, so it's the 5.9 over 2 years, so just under 3% across both.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, we will move on to item 5B1, resolution to amend the 2025 highway budget by $760,541. Administrator Leonard or Kevin?
Kevin can talk through kind of the situation.
Last year you were the savior, you got the funding for the highway facility. This year you're coming in for more money,
Yes, sir.
or this month.
Thank you, Chair Robinson.
You're welcome. Just stating the obvious. It's just.
One of the struggles we ran into this year is delay in our truck deliveries. We have 4 of our plow trucks that are our main plow trucks that go out for every storm that were, according to contract, were supposed to be delivered the first week of November. And we've been notified that those are delayed due to various things, equipment, labor, just over, I guess they're just kind of back ordered through the vendor that's supplying those. We've tried negotiating, we've tried looking at, I think, probably 3 or 4 different vendors to see if we can move those trucks and get them built somewhere else and get those completed, and really kind of ran into some brick walls with it. We started looking at some used trucks and some other options out there to see if somebody might be trading in some trucks that were in better condition than ours. In some of those talks, I did get a hold of the fleet people over at Minnesota DOT. They're different than us. The state has their plow trucks, so rather than having a group like us that has 42 plow trucks, they have hundreds. I think they're like 460 some trucks that they have in their fleet. They kind of directed us around a little bit, showed us where their trucks that they would be selling would be available. We looked through those and didn't really find anything. And then in that search, our new equipment supervisor found a couple new plow trucks that were built as kind of speculation trucks. There was a vendor in Minnesota, when they started to see all these backlogs coming, rather than telling their customers they were years out, they apparently ordered up 100 trucks and started building them to DOT specs. And they'd sold most of them other than a couple that they had left. So we went over, took a look at those. They match up very closely to our specifications. They have a few things that are a little bit above what we do in ours. They have a little bit more horsepower. They have a better greasing system, a little bit more control on their wing for it. A little bit different brine system that's in there. We have a lot of brine in all of our trucks, and they have one that's kind of like a slurry system. So we're kind of excited to see maybe with something like this too, it would help us take some of those really old trucks that are not reliable. We're getting bills that are $10,000 frequently on these just to keep them running. And our primary service at the highway department is winter maintenance. And we're going into this winter with a pretty tough looking fleet of our 4 spare trucks we had. And then these 4 that were supposed to be replaced are giving us some pretty good sized bills. One of them we've parked for most of the year because our mechanics are concerned about some of the mechanical functions on it. So rather than pushing it and having something break on it, they essentially parked it for the year. So we're looking to get funding to cover the cost of these 2 plow trucks that are ready to go and would be ready for us for winter. That'll help give us a little bit of breathing room by taking at least 2 of our worst ones out And the one that we've parked, we'll divest of that one. We would keep the other truck through the season, knowing that we would have 5 spare trucks, but they're not as reliable as we like to have for our spare trucks. So I think that's my synopsis. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
And we're funding it through?
Through reserves. So if you recall getting the fund balance memo last month, that in the highway fund balance, we had an equipment replacement fund to be established in 2025. Part of that is to make sure that we can purchase equipment when we get the opportunity to, because the ones that we budgeted for in 2025 had been ordered, but we won't actually get them and pay for them until next year. We do have to amend the budget because that money is already encumbered. So again, we're utilizing that money in the way that it's intended to be. We just need to do it this year as opposed to waiting.
One other thing that, just in terms of process, this did go, Kevin, Chris, and Sam made the same presentation to infrastructure.
And it was supported at the committee level. And again, this is an opportunity that meets our needs, which is why it's being advanced now, because of the concerns over the spare vehicles. Chair Gibbs.
Just 2 questions. So the ones that we've on order, are we then going to reduce the replacement, those ordered by the 2 that we're not replacing them?
The 4 that are on order, the trucks are sitting at the dealership. All the equipment is there. They just we're not in their schedule till March, April, and May to get them completed.
Okay. But I guess since we're taking replacement, or we're replacing too early versus getting them until March, right?
We would have to, if the request is for us to cut back on our trucks, we would have to, the bid that we would be doing in 26 would be the one, so it'd be a truck for like 27.
Good. Okay.
Supervisor Poole.
What would be the worst case scenario if we don't get these 2 trucks?
Our issue is we're, in those older trucks, the way that we work financially is our trucks have an hourly rate that gets charged to them. We're going upside down in these other ones right now. Our repair costs are exceeding the revenue that we're bringing in on them. And then for emergency services, we would either have to split up plow routes and have either one area specifically get delayed or try to split it up during storms, depending on which vehicles go down, and have basically delayed response time for winter maintenance.
Chair Gibbs.
Well, with that understanding, I'll make a motion that we approve the resolution to amend the 2025 highway budget by the $760,541 and approve the purchases of those 2 trucks.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor of adoption of the resolution to amend the 2025 highway budget will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And we will deal with the funding for synergy target industry and site readiness evaluation. Administrator Leonard.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was something, as well as item 5B5, that were taken up at the most recent Extension Education Economic Development Committee meeting. Essentially, Centergy has a proposal whereby they're going to have a site readiness evaluation, and I'm going to do a poor job explaining why that's important, but Angel from Centergy came and made that presentation to the committee, and it's recorded. You can certainly watch it. But essentially, it's to position us well with respect to industry that is looking at relocating to potential areas for purposes of expansion or, well, generally new construction. And it's something that our region hasn't had done in some time. The cost to Marathon County is within the document, and I apologize, I should have looked at that. $5,000? I think that's I can find it
Yes.
relatively quickly. $5,000 for Marathon County. Similar request is being made to all the member counties of Centergy, which is central Wisconsin. Angel's request was to have the county consider that, and funding would be needed for 2026. The same is true with respect to 5B5, that funding would actually be for really use in '26. My preference would be, if you give me some time, I can go back and sit down with Sam and Chris. We have to do some work on the special projects budget that I referenced before. I think we could bring back a proposal to utilize that funding when we crunch out what we expect for future expenses through the remainder of the year, to utilize that, or we can identify potentially contingency as a source, but neither Centergy nor the Historical Society needed a determination this month, so you have time. But that is probably more than you were looking for on 5B5 at this time, but each of them are really requests. They made it through Extension, Education, Economic Development, recommending both. With respect to 5B5, they recommended the middle tier, which I'll find that amount. My recollection is 20,000.
They recommended it with us finding the funding source, so. I assume it's here for action. I thought that there was a desire to try to get the contract locked in.
I talked to Angel. She didn't, neither was pressing, and I talked to Blake from the Historical Society. Next month would be fine for his request as well. So if it's amenable to this committee, if I can drill into the budget a little bit to really make what I think is the best recommendation for you to have, where to have that come, where the funding to come from, I can do that. It's $25,000. I really don't see it being a problem. You still have a fair amount in contingency if you wanted to just move forward with that, but.
Why don't we jump to 5B5 as well at this time, and we can consider them if we're going to delay them together. That would be the Historical Society's request, and I think.
Thank you. And the Historical Society request is really in connection with the upcoming 250th anniversary programming they're looking to do. And the recommendation from Extension, Education, Economic Development on page 109 of your packet, they recommended proceeding with funding level number 2, which is the $20,000. They are making asks of various other organizations, municipal, I should say governmental and non-governmental as well.
Chair Gibbs.
I make a motion that we postpone action and let the administrator come back in November with a proposed identifying budget line item for the two projects, item 5B2 and item 5B5.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor of delaying this for 1 month will signify by, a month? Because we meet again on the 28th. Next meeting?
No later than November.
Okay, no later than November. That's acceptable to the second?
Yes.
All right. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor of that motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? That motion carries unanimously. All right, that takes us to item B2, or 5B3 and 5, we're going to talk about 5B3 and 5B4 together. And this came to us via discussion that took place at the executive committee relative to the salaries for the next county board, and one of the ways of funding. A portion of that would be the $30 a month internet stipend that is currently paid to certain members, but not all members of the county board, because not everybody's claiming it. So my understanding of that is if we don't take action relative to the salaries, it goes up automatically by 3%. And so, but this committee has the ability to change that recommendation. And then the second issue would be, what do we do with the internet?
If I can just clarify, with respect to, Mr. Chair, you're absolutely correct. Your resolution that the board will ultimately consider relative to county board raises will have a 3% increase built within it unless this committee recommends something else to change it to. And just to clarify, with respect to the proposed budget that is in the committee's hands and the board's hands, it does have built in a 3% increase for 2026 for board salaries, and it already has it continues the provision for internet reimbursement for supervisors consistent with the direction I got from the executive committee.
So the issue before us is, do we want to deviate? Does it automatically go to the board at the 3% without any action on our part? But we have to set that prior to people taking out nomination papers on December 1st. So it's got to be done between now and November 11th. Chair Gibbs.
As I understand it, our ordinance says we have to send, the recommendation has to go to the county board for action in November.
In October or in November?
November.
Okay.
November. I remember Mike's comments it was November.
So, on the salary issue, does anybody disagree with the 3% increase? Some of the discussion that took place at the executive committee was that some people have additional expenses associated with obtaining internet service, and that if we eliminated the stipend, it would impact them financially, and that we said that we would discuss that as part of any discussion on the salaries if the decision was to eliminate the stipend. I know that I don't claim it. I don't know how, I think approximately half the board claims that stipend.
Yeah, I think two different things. The board prior to this one, almost 30 members of the board collected the stipend. And this current board, about 50% of the board, 18 or 19 of the board members are collecting the stipend. There's a certification that has to be filed with the clerk that your acquisition costs exceed the $30 for it not to be considered compensation by IRS's code. So that certification, if not filled out, the supervisor does not receive the $30. So under the current if you certify that you're paying more than $30 and you want to claim, you can fill out the certification and then you're reimbursed the $30. Now, that started when this board moved from originally paper packets to the iPads. So that was back in 2012, I think it was. And so the offset was that there was savings that was being generated from mailing and the creation of the packets themselves. The discussion, at least a little bit of the discussion at the executive committee centered around, well, is it really now continued needed to continue to pay the $30 stipend when almost everyone would normally have internet anyway? and some comments centered around, well, and in some cases, less than 50% of the people are collecting it currently. So with the building of the budget, with, I think, the administrator's term, not mine, the shared sacrifice that has been seen throughout the county and each department and what they have done to build this budget, I'll at least have a discussion about whether or not to continue that $30 stipend, and/or in conjunction with the discussion about the 3% automatic raises. One of the supervisors felt that asking for continuing a raise for the supervisors was unnecessary, but they also said, well, the trade-off would be leave the 3% raise in, and in light of if they were to take out the $30 stipend for internet. So that was part of the discussion.
Or increase the, front-end load the salary increase. So with it being in, we don't need, well, if you wanted to take the $30 stipend out, we could do that prior to publication. My only concern about that is I think that's a discussion that the full board should have. And if we do it prior to publication, the full board isn't engaged in that discussion, but we wanted to bring it here. Any thoughts relative to the 3% and/or the continuation of the stipend? Supervisor Lemmer.
So just so I have this correct, the budget as it's built right now, the 3% and the $30 are already in. And this would require some sort of amendment to change, to take away the $30, and then what goes, where does that $30 multiplied by however many go? What would happen to that money?
So the $30 objection compound questions. But I'll start with the last part. The $30 stipend annualized for all the members, I believe is $13,860. I did the math on my phone. Just shy of 14,000, which we have 14,000 in the budget. Again, consistent with the direction from executive. The budget is built with the raise for supervisors based on 3%, and your existing rule, section 2.01 sub 19 sub E, provides that the initial resolution, unless modified as set forth below, the initial resolution before the board will provide for a 3% annual increase in salary to county board members and the chairperson to be effective the first pay period in April following the spring election of supervisors in even numbered years. The unless as modified below provides this committee with the authority to make any modification. Ultimately, of course, the county board has to vote on that salary increase, and that needs to take place, as Chair Gibbs referenced, at your November meeting.
Supervisor Lemmer.
But where will the $14,000 go if it's not encumbered?
That would need to be addressed, and the board would have to figure out where to put it. You'd have $14,000. You're consistent with your previous approach. You could put it towards capital, but ultimately it would be in the hands of the board where those funds would go.
Chair Gibbs.
Yeah, I think it's currently, there's no specific line item in the budget for the 14,000. I don't believe. It's in the county board's budget, a line item, county board. So it would, you potentially, even if you didn't authorize it, it's just like currently. It was authorized and was built into the budget for the full 38 members to draw it. It wasn't claimed by all 38 members. So at the end of the year, after the audit, just like when we build the budget for mileage, we build an amount in there, but if it's not claimed, it rolls over into CIP or rolls over into fund balance. And then depending on whether or not our working capital fund balance is 100% funded per our policy, any excess then rolls over into CIP the following year. So if you chose not to do anything, but you chose to eliminate the $30 stipend, you could reallocate that 14,000 or 13,000, whatever dollar figure is, or you could do nothing with it. It would effectively roll over into CIP the following year if it was unused.
And if I may, just to clarify, there is a special line
Oh,
in the
there is.
county board's overall budget that is underneath the umbrella of the clerk's office.
Oh, okay.
For that reimbursement. It's under the utility services line, but it is your internet stipend.
Gotcha. I misspoke, sorry.
What are your, silence is assumed to support the 3% increase, and we can deal with the stipend now or in the future, and my preference would be in the future to give the full county board the ability to weigh in if we decide to change it. Supervisor Hart.
Thank you. And then just to clarify again, and I think this has been repeated, but I just want to clarify it one more time. So is there wouldn't, absent us doing anything right now, there wouldn't be any other separate vote that would come up to approve or not approve this, correct?
At the board level, there would be. The board
be
would
at the
need to
board.
approve it.
It will
Okay.
have to go to the board.
And not, would that be a separate vote, or would that be a vote along with adopting the full budget? I guess
Separate
that's
vote
my
in November.
question.
A separate vote in November
Okay.
would be required on salaries
Okay.
in November.
So are you comfortable that we can take that? Amanda, I guess we'll ask you, where if inaction results in the resolution being advanced, or if we change it, the resolution would be advanced.
I would interpret it that inaction would just advance it as is.
All right. So anybody wish to make a motion, or are you comfortable with taking it for, taking it automatically forward? Supervisor Marshall.
I suggest we take it to the full board for discussion. Thank you.
I think that's what happens through our inaction. Chair Gibbs.
But I believe that it goes in November according to ordinance, correct?
It reads that under 2.01 sub 19 sub E, procedure, under sub 1, it indicates a vote will be taken to set supervisor and board officer salaries, in November of odd numbered years for the next succeeding 2-year term. So short answer, yes, you will vote on it in November.
This might be an issue, the timing might be an issue for the Rules Review Committee to look at so that it's done prior to the budget. So, all right, if there's no motions, that issue will be advanced and we'll have that discussion later. Register of Deeds quarterly update, she submitted that to us all electronically. I don't know if there are any questions. I think she has typically a 4:30 commitment.
She does, and I would just say that my only other update, and I referenced this before as part of the budget, they're going from an office of 4 to 3. They also have a vacancy, so want to give a shout out to Jenny Lemmer and Wendy from the Register of Deeds office. They are small but mighty and holding down the fort with 2 of what, at least this year, would have been a staff of 4. They're doing a great job.
All right. Then we go to next meeting date, times and announcements. Committee member, I think we have enough on our plate for the foreseeable future. If you have items, please let me know and we can get those on the agenda. Our next meeting is Monday at 8:30. I am anticipating that that will be a relatively short meeting again for us to consider any amendments to the budget prior to publication. And I know sometimes we will get adjustments from state agencies and others. I don't know if those will be timely, but we still need to authorize the publication of the budget, and Sam will have all the necessary and associated information for us. And then we are scheduled to meet on the 28th. One of the issues that we have before us, given the presentation that we had last month, was the future of the university campus. And the educational side of that is in the purview of the Extension Education and Economic Development Committee, and the property is within the jurisdiction of this committee. So the thought was that we would have a joint meeting. Given our schedule, the request from the EEDC meeting was that we meet with them jointly on November 6th at their regular meeting on the 6th. Does anyone have a problem with an additional meeting? I know that we will be busy between now and November 11th. I promise not to have a second meeting in November. And probably we'll only have one meeting in December, just to make up for our overtaxation of you during September, October, and early November. Would that work? And then we can fold into the, do you have, would you like to be here for that discussion? I think what we're trying to do is set the process by which we will go about, making the decisions relative to the future. It's not a decisional meeting, it's rather a process meeting. And my thoughts are is that we have to have a decision by July 1st, given the consequences and the potential impacts on the 2027 budget. So with that, we would just move forward with, I think Chair Gibbs, you have a good understanding of the history of the campus, and I think for some, that will be an important component of that November 6th meeting. So let's plan on meeting on the 6th at 3, an additional meeting. And if you could make sure that that's noticed as a joint meeting. All right, anything else? Any other items? If not, what are your wishes relative to item number 8? Chair Gibbs moves to adjourn, seconded by Supervisor Lemmer. All those in favor of adjournment will signify by saying aye.
Aye. Sorry.
Opposed, no. That carries unanimously. We are adjourned. I wanted to grab you for a few minutes, but